My dad said, "We're skipping your kid's birthday. Money's tight." I believed him. The next day, I opened Facebook and saw his post. Mountains of gifts, all for my sister's kids. My daughter looked up at me and whispered, "Dad, don't they need me?" That night, I took back every payment I'd made toward their mortgage. By 6 a.m., my dad was beating on my door, red-faced, begging me. I, 34M, stared at the screen until my vision blurred. There they were, mountains of wrapped presents, balloons touching the ceiling, a custom cake shaped like a castle. My sister's twins were grinning in matching princess dresses, surrounded by more gifts than I'd seen at a toy store. The caption read, "Nothing's too good for our precious grandbabies. Best day ever." My daughter's birthday had been 3 days ago. She'd turned 6. We'd had cupcakes from the grocery store, and I'd given her the art set I'd been saving up for. She'd smiled and thanked me, but I'd seen the way her eyes kept drifting to the door that afternoon, waiting for grandparents who never came. When I called my father 2 weeks before her birthday, he'd given me the same speech I'd heard a dozen times. Money was tight. They were barely scraping by. They couldn't afford gas to drive across town, let alone a present. I'd listened, felt guilty for even asking, and told him I understood. I'd been helping them with their mortgage for 3 years, ever since my mother got sick and the medical bills started piling up. $1,500 a month, like clockwork, directly deposited into their account. I looked at the Facebook post again. The timestamp said it was from yesterday morning. I counted the presents in the photo. Stopped at 20. There were more in the background I couldn't make out clearly. My daughter appeared in the doorway of my home office, dragging her stuffed rabbit by one ear. She'd been quieter than usual since her birthday. She climbed into my lap without asking, something she only did when she was sad. She pointed at the screen before I could close the browser. Her voice came out small and uncertain. She asked if those were Grandpa and Grandma's house. I told her yes. She recognized the living room from the few times we'd visited in the past year. She was silent for a moment, studying the image. Then she asked why Grandpa said they didn't have money for her birthday if they had money for all those presents. She wanted to know if her cousins needed the presents more than she needed them. Her final question hit me like a physical blow. She asked if maybe she'd been bad, and that was why they didn't come. I held her tighter and told her none of this was her fault. I told her she was perfect and good and loved. But even as I said the words, something cold and sharp was crystallizing in my chest. That night, after I'd put her to bed and read her 3 extra stories, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and my bank statements. I'd been paying their mortgage since Mom's cancer diagnosis. $18,000 a year. $54,000 total. I'd done it without question, because family helped family. Because my father had raised me to believe that you took care of your own. I'd skipped vacations. I'd driven my car an extra 2 years past when I should have replaced it. I told my daughter we couldn't afford dance classes this year because money was tight. And all the while, I'd been funding a household that could apparently drop what I estimated to be at least $500 on a single birthday party for kids who weren't even their grandchildren. They were, but apparently some grandchildren mattered more than others. I opened my banking app. The next mortgage payment was scheduled to process in 2 days. I canceled it. Then I canceled the recurring payment. Then I drafted an email to my father. I kept it simple. I told him I'd seen the Facebook post. I told him I was done paying their mortgage. I told him not to contact me unless he was ready to have an honest conversation about why my daughter wasn't worth $20 for a birthday card, but my sister's kids were worth hundreds in presents. I sent it at 11:42 p.m. Then I shut my laptop and went to bed. I didn't sleep well, but I slept better than I had in weeks. The pounding on my door started at 6:13 a.m. I knew it was my father before I looked through the peephole. He was alone, red-faced, still in the clothes he'd probably slept in. He was shouting my name, telling me to open the door, telling me we needed to talk. I made coffee first. Let him pound and shout. My daughter was awake now. I could hear her moving around upstairs. I texted my sister-in-law, my ex-wife, and asked if she could pick our daughter up early for her week. She asked if everything was okay. I told her there was a family situation and I didn't want our daughter around for it. She said she'd be there in 20 minutes. My father was still pounding when I finally opened the door. He pushed past me without invitation, started talking before he was fully inside. He wanted to know what I thought I was doing. He told me I couldn't just stop paying their mortgage. They'd already spent this month's money. They'd fall behind. They could lose the house. I let him wind down. Then I asked him about the birthday party. His face did something complicated. He started to say it wasn't what it looked like, then stopped. He tried a different approach, told me my sister had bought most of those presents, not them. They'd just hosted. I asked him how much they'd contributed. He said maybe $50. I asked him why $50 for my sister's kids was manageable, but $20 for mine wasn't. He didn't have an answer for that. Instead, he pivoted. He told me I was being selfish. He reminded me that my mother was sick, that they were struggling, that family was supposed to help family. He said I was punishing them over a misunderstanding. I told him there was no misunderstanding. I'd seen exactly what I needed to see. I asked him a simple question. When was the last time they'd come to see my daughter? He started to answer, then stopped. Neither of us could remember. I could actually. It had been 7 months ago, a Sunday afternoon, and they'd stayed less than an hour before leaving to have dinner with my sister's family. I asked him when was the last time they'd sent her a card, called her, asked about school. He told me I was being unfair, that they loved her, that they were just busy. I asked him what they were busy doing, that they couldn't drive 15 minutes to see their granddaughter on her birthday, but could throw a party for my sister's kids the next day. He tried to tell me my sister needed more support. Her husband didn't make as much money. They were struggling with 2 kids. I reminded him that I was a single father. I was raising my daughter alone. I was working 50 hours a week and still making time to be present in her life. And somehow, I was also supposed to fund his retirement while he ignored my child. That's when he got angry. Really angry. He told me I'd always been the golden child, the one who had it easy. He said I made good money. I was in tech, worked as a senior developer, and I could afford to help. He said my sister struggled, and they had to help her more because she needed it more. He said I was being petty and vindictive over a child's birthday party. I asked him if he understood what he was saying. He was telling me that because I'd worked hard and built a career, I deserved less of their time and attention. Because I was financially stable, my daughter was less important than my sister's kids. I asked him if he realized that he was punishing me for being responsible. He didn't see it that way. To him, I was the one who could handle being neglected. I was the strong one, the independent one. I didn't need them the way my sister did. I told him he was right about one thing. I didn't need them. Not anymore. I told him the mortgage payments were done. I'd given them $54,000 over 3 years, and I had nothing to show for it except a daughter who thought her grandparents didn't love her. He told me I was overreacting. He promised they'd do better. They'd come to see her more. They'd make it right. But I'd heard these promises before, usually right around the time the mortgage payment was due. I told him that if he wanted to make it right, he could start by explaining to my daughter why she wasn't worth their time. He could tell her why her cousins got parties and presents while she got excuses. And he could do it without my money cushioning his life anymore. My ex-wife arrived while we were still in the living room. I heard her car in the driveway and went upstairs to get my daughter. She was already dressed, her overnight bag packed. She was a perceptive kid. She asked if Grandpa was mad at me. I told her Grandpa and I were having a disagreement, but it wasn't her fault and it wasn't about her. We went downstairs together. My father tried to talk to her, tried to give her a hug, but she held back. She wasn't normally a shy kid, but something in the tension had made her uncertain. I walked them out to the car, helped my daughter with her seatbelt, kissed her forehead. My ex-wife asked again if I was okay. I told her I would be. When I came back inside, my father was sitting on my couch with his head in his hands. He looked older than I'd ever seen him. He asked me what he was supposed to do. The mortgage payment was due in 5 days. They didn't have it. They'd already spent this month's budget. I told him that wasn't my problem anymore. He'd made choices about where his money and time went. Those choices had consequences. I suggested he ask my sister for help, since she seemed to be doing well enough to throw elaborate parties. He told me my sister didn't have that kind of money. I told him that was interesting, considering all the presents. He admitted that they'd helped pay for some of it. They'd wanted to give the twins a special day. I asked him why my daughter didn't deserve a special day. He didn't have an answer. I told him to leave. He tried to argue, but I was done. I opened the front door and waited. He left, finally, but not before telling me I'd regret this. He said family was everything, and I was throwing it away over money and pride. I closed the door behind him and stood in my empty house. My phone started ringing within the hour. My sister. I let it go to voicemail. She left a message calling me selfish and cruel. She said our father was in tears, that I was destroying the family. She said Mom was having chest pains from the stress. She told me I needed to fix this immediately. I didn't call her back. My mother called the next day. She was calmer than my sister, but the message was the same. She wanted to know why I was doing this. She said they'd always loved me, always supported me. She reminded me of everything they'd sacrificed when I was growing up. She asked how I could abandon them when they needed me most. I almost caved. Almost. But then I remembered my daughter's face when she asked if she'd been bad. I called my mother back that evening. I asked her a question I should have asked years ago. Did she love my daughter? She said of course she did. I asked her to prove it. I asked her to tell me 3 things about my daughter's life right now. 3 things happening at school, or with her friends, or her hobbies. She couldn't. She started trying, then stopped. She asked why I was putting her on the spot like this. I told her it wasn't a spot. It was a basic knowledge of her granddaughter's life. I could tell her everything about my sister's twins, what grades they were in, what activities they did, what their favorite foods were, because my parents talked about them constantly. But they couldn't tell me anything about my own child. My mother started crying. She said it wasn't that they didn't care. They just saw my sister's kids more often. They were more involved because my sister needed the help. I asked her when that became my problem to fund. I reminded her that every month, I gave them $1,500 I could have spent on my daughter. I could have put her in dance classes. I could have taken her on a vacation. I could have started a college fund. Instead, I'd been subsidizing their ability to play favorites. She told me that was cruel. I told her the truth was often cruel. Update 1. 3 weeks passed. The calls and messages had slowed down, though my sister still sent me occasional texts calling me heartless. I'd blocked my father's number after he'd sent me a dozen voicemails ranging from angry to pleading. My mother tried the guilt approach a few more times before giving up. I'd gotten my daughter into dance classes. She'd started 2 weeks ago and talked about nothing else. She was making friends, learning routines, coming home tired and happy. The money I'd been sending to my parents was now going into a college fund and enrichment activities. It felt right in a way nothing had felt right in years. Then I got a call from my uncle, my mother's brother. I'd always liked him. He'd stayed mostly neutral in family drama. He asked if we could meet for coffee. Said he wanted to understand what was happening. I agreed, mostly because I respected him and partly because I was curious what story my parents had told the extended family. We met at a diner halfway between our houses. He ordered coffee and pie. I ordered coffee and waited. He got straight to it. He'd heard my side from my parents, but he wanted to hear it from me. So I told him. All of it. The mortgage payments, the birthday, the Facebook post, my daughter's question, everything. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he told me something I hadn't known. My parents had refinanced their house 2 years ago. Took out equity. He'd thought it was for medical bills, but now he wasn't sure. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. I asked him how much equity they'd taken out. He said he wasn't certain, but he thought it was around $60,000. I asked him what they'd done with it. He said he'd assumed medical bills, but my mother's insurance had covered most of her treatment. He'd wondered at the time, but hadn't pushed. I drove straight home and pulled up the county property records. It was all public information. My parents had refinanced 2 years and 3 months ago. They'd pulled out $75,000 in equity. I'd started paying their mortgage 3 years ago. For the first 9 months, it had been to help with medical bills. Then the refinance happened, and I'd just kept paying because they'd told me they were still struggling. They'd never mentioned the refinance. Never mentioned the $75,000. I called my uncle back. Asked him if he knew what they'd spent the money on. He said he'd heard they'd helped my sister with a down payment on her new house. He thought it was maybe $20,000 or $30,000. He wasn't sure about the rest. I looked up my sister's property records. She'd bought her house 2 years ago. Down payment was $40,000. I did the math. $75,000 in refinance. $40,000 to my sister. That left $35,000 unaccounted for, plus the $54,000 I'd paid over 3 years. My parents had had access to over $160,000 in the past 3 years, and they claimed they couldn't afford a birthday present for my daughter. I forwarded all the documentation to my uncle, told him to do whatever he wanted with it. I was done. He called me back 2 hours later. He'd confronted my parents. My mother had admitted to the refinance. She'd said they'd helped my sister because she needed it more. They'd used about $15,000 on some home repairs. The rest had gone into their savings and various expenses over 2 years. When he'd asked why they'd kept taking my money if they had savings, my mother had said they needed the security. They were getting older. They needed a cushion. I asked him if they understood that they'd been lying to me for years. He said my mother insisted they hadn't lied. They'd just never mentioned it because they knew I'd stop helping if I knew they had savings. He was right. I would have stopped immediately. My uncle apologized to me, said he wished he'd known sooner. He told me he'd lost a lot of respect for his sister over this. He also told me that he'd let other family members know what had really happened because my parents had been telling everyone I'd abandoned them in their time of need. The family grapevine worked fast. By the end of the week, I'd gotten calls from 2 cousins and my aunt. They'd all heard the real story. They all said some version of the same thing. They didn't blame me. They would have done the same thing. They were sorry my daughter had been hurt. My sister, predictably, doubled down. She left me a voicemail saying I was trying to destroy our parents' reputation out of spite. She said even if they had savings, I should have kept helping because that's what family does. She said the money they'd given her for her house had been a gift, and I was just jealous that they'd helped her and not me. She wasn't wrong about the jealousy, exactly. But it wasn't about the money. It was about the fact that they'd moved heaven and earth to help her while telling me they couldn't afford a card for my daughter. Update 2. 2 months after I'd cut off the mortgage payments, my father's car appeared in my driveway on a Saturday morning. I hadn't spoken to either of my parents in weeks. I watched from the window as both of them got out. My mother looked smaller somehow. My father looked tired. I didn't want to let them in, but my daughter was at a friend's house, and I figured it was better to deal with this without her present. I opened the door, but didn't invite them inside. Told them they had 5 minutes. My father did most of the talking. He said they'd worked out a payment plan with the bank. They were managing. It was tight, but they'd figure it out. He said that wasn't why they were here. My mother asked if she could see her granddaughter. Her voice was shaking. I told her my daughter was out. My mother asked when they could see her. I asked if they actually wanted to see her, or if they just wanted to ease their guilt. That wasn't fair, maybe, but I was still angry. My father said they wanted to make things right. They'd been wrong. They'd taken me for granted. They'd played favorites. They wanted another chance. I asked them if they understood why I was angry. Really understood. My father started to say yes, but I cut him off. I told them to tell me, in their own words, what they'd done wrong. There was a long silence. Finally, my mother spoke. She said they'd neglected my daughter. They'd prioritized my sister's family over mine. They'd taken my financial help while lying about their situation. She said she'd told herself it was okay because I seemed fine, because I was capable and independent, because I didn't seem to need them the way my sister did. I asked her if she understood how damaging that logic was. I told her that competence wasn't permission to ignore someone, that I'd worked hard and built a good life specifically so I could take care of my daughter, not so they could take advantage of me while neglecting her. My father said they understood that now. He said they'd been selfish. They'd convinced themselves they were helping the child who needed it most, but really they'd just been helping the child who demanded the most attention. My sister had always been the squeaky wheel. I'd always been the one who managed on my own. I asked them what they wanted from me. My mother said they wanted a relationship with their granddaughter. They wanted to be better grandparents. They weren't asking for money. They just wanted a chance. I told them I'd think about it. I told them that any relationship they had with my daughter going forward would be on my terms. They would show up when they said they'd show up. They would remember her birthday. They would put in actual effort. And the first time they flaked, the first time they chose my sister's kids over her, we were done. Permanently. They both agreed. Too quickly, maybe. But it was a start. I told them to leave and that I'd call them in a few days. After they left, I sat in my quiet house and wondered if I was making a mistake. Trust, once broken, was hard to rebuild. Especially when it came to my daughter. She'd already learned that adults could be unreliable. I didn't want to teach her that lesson again. But she also deserved grandparents who cared about her. She deserved family. If they were genuinely willing to change, maybe it was worth the risk. I called my mother 3 days later. Told her she could come visit the following Saturday. 2 hours. I'd be present the entire time. She thanked me, her voice thick with emotion. That Saturday, they showed up exactly on time. They brought a present for my daughter, an art set, a good one, more extensive than anything I would have bought. My daughter was hesitant at first, but they were patient. They asked her about school, about dance class, about her friends. They listened to her answers. They seemed genuinely interested. It wasn't perfect. It was awkward and tentative, but it was something. They started coming every other week. My mother would call in between visits to ask about my daughter. My father sent her a card for no reason. Just a note saying he was proud of her. Small things, but consistent things. My sister, unsurprisingly, lost her mind. She accused my parents of abandoning her kids. She said they were punishing her to appease me. My mother, to her credit, told my sister that she wasn't being punished. They were just trying to have a more balanced relationship with all their grandchildren. My sister stopped speaking to them for a while. My parents seemed okay with that. Maybe they'd finally realized that constantly accommodating her tantrums had enabled them. 3 months after my parents started visiting regularly, my daughter asked me if Grandma and Grandpa loved her now. The question broke my heart. I told her they'd always loved her. They'd just been confused about how to show it. It wasn't a lie exactly, more like a charitable interpretation. She seemed satisfied with that answer. She told me she was glad they visited now. She liked when Grandma helped her with art projects. She liked when Grandpa told her stories about when I was a kid. I watched them together during their visits, watched my parents trying so hard to make up for lost time. I didn't know if it would last. I didn't know if they'd slip back into old patterns. But for now, for this moment, they were trying. And my daughter was happier. That was enough. I never sent them another dollar for their mortgage. That relationship was permanently changed. But the relationship between them and my daughter was slowly being rebuilt. They'd learned an expensive lesson about taking people for granted. I'd learned that sometimes you had to burn things down before you could build something better. My daughter turned 7 last month. My parents showed up with a present and a cake. They stayed for the entire party. They took pictures and played games and made her feel special. My sister didn't come, but I hadn't expected her to. That bridge was probably burned for good. As I watched my daughter blow out her candles, surrounded by friends and grandparents who were actually present, I thought about that Facebook post that had started everything. Those mountains of presents for kids who weren't more deserving, just more demanding. The image that had finally shown me what I'd been refusing to see. Sometimes the worst thing someone can do is show you the truth. And sometimes, the best thing you can do is believe it. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with friends or family who might enjoy it too. Your support means a lot to us.